uninvited from my own brother's wedding, but they still took my $65,000. I gave them one final ultimatum. Either I'm there or there's no wedding. They laughed and told me I'd never do it. So I made one call, and by sunrise, everything they'd planned for months was already falling apart. You won't believe the phone call I got. Your family canceled your invitation, the wedding planner said, but they still want to keep the $65,000 deposit you paid. I was stunned, but then I took a deep breath and said, then cancel the entire wedding. There was a shocked gasp on the other end. But ma'am, you're not the bride. I replied, no, but I own the venue, the catering company, and every single hotel room they booked for their guests. That call changed everything, and it taught me the true meaning of family and self-respect. My name is Anya Reed, I'm 34, and I own Sapphire Luxury Hotels and Elite Catering. My brother, Ben, and I have always been thick as thieves, especially after our parents' messy divorce. When he got engaged, I was over the moon, so I happily put down a $65,000 deposit for his dream wedding at my finest venue. Little did I know, that gesture of love would quickly turn into a nightmare. Ben and I grew up in a humble neighborhood in Boston. He was only 2 years older, but he took his big brother role very seriously. I remember him walking me to school every day, holding my hand at crosswalks, always making sure no one dared to bully his little sister. We had that unbreakable sibling bond, the kind some people only dream of. Our world, though, was rocked when our parents, David and Carol, split when I was 12 and Ben was 14. It was ugly, endless arguments, slammed doors, a constant Cold War where they used us as messengers. Tell your father he's late on child support again, or ask your mother if I can pick you up an hour earlier on Sunday. We learned early on to rely only on each other. Money became tight. Mom, a former stay-at-home parent, struggled to find work. Dad was more interested in his new girlfriend than paying bills. By 16, I was waitressing after school, and Ben was stocking shelves at the grocery store. We pooled our meager earnings to buy groceries when Mom was short. We only have each other, Nat, Ben would say, counting coins on our bedroom floor. No matter what, I'll always have your back. That promise was our lifeline through high school and beyond. When I decided to study hospitality management, Ben was my biggest cheerleader. He'd skipped college, going straight into construction, eventually becoming a foreman. Every month, a portion of his paycheck landed in my account, helping with textbooks and living expenses. My career was a grind, but rewarding. I started as a front desk agent, worked my way up to supervisor, then director of operations at a prestigious hotel. At 27, I took a massive leap. I bought a struggling historic hotel, the Sapphire Grand, with my savings and a loan. It had beautiful bones, but terrible management. For 2 years, I worked 18-hour days renovating, rebuilding. Ben was right there with me. He used his construction contacts to get me reliable contractors at fair prices. On weekends, he'd bring his crew to tackle small projects for free. Consider it an investment in our future, he'd wink. The Sapphire Grand became profitable, leading to a second, then a third location. By 30, I had 5 luxury hotels and launched Elite Catering, specializing in high-end events. Through it all, Ben was my rock. He celebrated every win, consoled every setback. When a pipe burst at one of my hotels, he drove 3 hours in the middle of the night to supervise emergency repairs. Our parents noticed our success, but in vastly different ways. Dad suddenly wanted to reconnect, inviting us to fancy dinners. Mom grew oddly competitive, always comparing her lucky breaks to ours. Neither truly acknowledged our success was despite their absence, not because of their support. Then Sienna Montgomery entered the picture. Ben met her at a charity golf tournament my catering company was serving. She was stunning, polished, and from old money. Her father owned a chain of car dealerships. Her mother sat on several prestigious cultural boards. Something about Sienna felt off from the start. She spoke to my catering staff with a dismissive tone. When Ben introduced us, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you're the little sister who works in hotels." "How quaint," she said, looking around as if searching for someone more important. Ben was completely smitten. Within weeks, he spent all his free time with her. She introduced him to her country club friends, exclusive restaurants where he was treated like an outsider. Gradually, Ben started to change. He began using phrases like the right people and our kind of establishment. He traded his trusty pickup for a luxury SUV he could barely afford. Our weekly sibling dinners became monthly, then rare. When we did get together, Sienna was usually there, checking her watch, sighing loudly when we talked about childhood memories or inside jokes she couldn't share. Sienna and her mother, Victoria, made no secret of their disdain for me. At Ben's birthday dinner, Victoria asked pointed questions about my little hotel business, seemingly disappointed when I explained the scale of my operations. "Well, I suppose anyone can succeed in America these days," she said with a tight smile. "Though there is a difference between new money and established families." Sienna nodded in agreement. "It must be exhausting working in service. All those complaints and dirty rooms," she shuddered delicately. I tried to explain that as the owner, I rarely cleaned rooms myself anymore, but Ben interrupted. "Anya has always been a hard worker," he said, almost apologetically. "She'll probably sell the business once she settles down and starts a family." The comment stung. Ben knew how passionate I was about my career. In that moment, I realized how far he'd drifted from the brother who once knew me better than anyone. Despite the growing distance, I still loved Ben fiercely. I told myself it was a phase, that he was just trying to fit into Sienna's world. Surely the brother who held my hand at crosswalks was still in there somewhere. One crisp autumn evening, Ben called, his voice bubbling with excitement. She said yes, Nat. Sienna agreed to marry me. His happiness was contagious, and despite my reservations about his fiancée, I found myself genuinely thrilled for him. "That's wonderful, Ben. Tell me everything. How did you propose?" I curled up on my sofa, ready for the romantic details. He launched into the story of his elaborate proposal at the Montgomery family summer home in the Hamptons. Private chef, string quartet, thousands of rose petals. The ring was a 4-carat diamond that cost him 6 months' savings. "It sounds perfect," I said, ignoring the knot in my stomach. The extravagance seemed so unlike the practical brother I knew. "Have you set a date yet?" "Sienna wants a June wedding. Her mother says the best venues book up a year in advance, so we need to start planning immediately." He paused. "There's just one problem. The places Victoria suggested are either booked or way beyond our budget." I could hear the stress in his voice. Ben made a good living, but the Montgomerys lived in a different financial stratosphere. He was clearly worried about measuring up. "What about the Sapphire Grand?" I suggested. "The ballroom can hold 300 guests, and the gardens would be beautiful for a June ceremony." Silence. "I don't know, Nat. Sienna has her heart set on the Rosewood or the Peninsula." "The Sapphire Grand was just rated above both in Luxury Travel magazine," I pointed out. "And as the owner's brother, you'd get preferential booking and significant discounts." After more hesitation, Ben promised to discuss it with Sienna. 3 days later, he called back. "Sienna will consider the Sapphire Grand, but she wants to see it first, and she's concerned about the catering. Her mother knows several celebrity chefs." "Tell her Elite Catering can create any menu she desires," I said, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. "We have 2 Michelin-trained chefs on staff." The tour of the Sapphire Grand was tense. Sienna and Victoria walked through the ballroom with critical eyes, whispering and taking notes. My hotel manager, Michael, presented our most luxurious wedding package while I showed them the bridal suite with its panoramic city views. "The space is adequate," Victoria conceded reluctantly. "But the color scheme is all wrong for Sienna's vision. Would you be willing to reupholster the ballroom chairs and replace the draperies?" I blinked. "We could certainly add chair covers and decorative elements to match your palette," I offered. "Complete reupholstery of 200 chairs would be quite costly and unnecessary." Sienna pursed her lips. "Mother, perhaps we should continue looking at the Rosewood." Ben shot me a pleading look. I recognized that expression from our childhood, when he needed me to compromise to keep the peace. With a deep breath, I smiled at my future sister-in-law. Why don't you show me your Pinterest board? I'm sure we can find creative solutions to transform the space into exactly what you're envisioning. That concession opened the floodgates. Over the next hour, Sienna detailed her dream wedding, which seemed lifted straight from a royal ceremony. Imported flowers, custom lighting, a champagne fountain, a 10-tier cake. When Michael discreetly provided a preliminary estimate, Ben went pale. Even with my owner's discount, the wedding would cost well over $100,000. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. As my gift to you both, I said, I would like to cover the venue and catering deposit. $65,000 toward your special day. Ben's eyes widened. Nat, that's too generous. We can't accept that. But Sienna and Victoria exchanged glances. That would be lovely, Sienna said quickly. We accept your generous offer. Even for a successful business owner like me, $65,000 was a significant amount. It represented months of profit, but I told myself it was worth it to support my brother and perhaps build a bridge with my new extended family. The planning began immediately. Sienna hired Chloe, one of the city's most exclusive wedding planners. I expected to be included in major decisions, given my financial contribution and ownership of the venue, but I quickly discovered I was mistaken. Sienna scheduled tastings without inviting me. Chloe sent emails about architectural changes to the ballroom without copying me. When I asked Ben about being excluded, he seemed uncomfortable. Sienna just wants to make sure everything is perfect, he explained. She feels there might be a conflict of interest if you're too involved since it's your business. I swallowed my hurt feelings and tried to respect their process. However, the situation became increasingly difficult. Sienna and Victoria made demanding and often unreasonable requests. They insisted my staff remove a historic chandelier because it didn't match. They demanded 15 different sample menus. They scheduled appointments with my overworked venue coordinator at odd hours, often canceling last minute. Through it all, I maintained my professionalism. I wanted this wedding to be perfect for Ben, even if it meant tolerating Sienna's bridezilla behavior. My staff, loyal to me, did their best, though I could see the strain. You're a saint, Michael told me after a particularly difficult meeting with Victoria. If she weren't your future family, I would have shown her the door weeks ago. The $65,000 deposit was officially processed 6 months before the wedding. I signed the paperwork, specifying it covered the venue, basic catering, and wedding party hotel rooms. Additional costs for upgrades, special requests, and guest accommodations would be billed separately. As the wedding date approached, I expected my formal invitation. When the 3-month mark passed, I casually mentioned it to Ben. Oh, the invitations went out last week, he said vaguely. Sienna handled the guest list. I'm sure yours is on the way. Another month passed. Nothing. I told myself there was a mix-up, or they assumed I didn't need one since I was so involved. Still, unease gnawed at me. The first truly alarming sign came when my cousin Laura called to thank me for her invitation. The gold foil embossing must have cost a fortune, she gushed, and the handwritten note from Sienna was such a nice touch. My heart sank. I had received neither. When I checked with other family members, they had all received theirs weeks ago. That evening, I called Ben directly. Is there something I should know about the wedding? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Everyone else seems to have received their invitations. There was a long pause. Sienna has been handling the guest list, he finally said. I'll check with her and get back to you. 3 days later, I still hadn't heard. I decided on a more direct approach and texted him. Need to finalize my attendance details for your wedding. Should I bring a plus one? What color dress coordinates with the wedding party? His response was vague. Still working out some details. We'll let you know soon. Around the same time, I noticed other concerning patterns. The bridal shower had apparently happened the previous weekend, but I hadn't been invited. Photos appeared on social media of Ben, Sienna, and both families at an engagement photo shoot. Again, I was excluded. During a routine check-in with my hotel staff about the arrangements, I learned Sienna had requested a meeting to review the seating chart. Curious, I asked to see a copy. My name was nowhere to be found. There must be a mistake, I told my events coordinator. I'm the groom's sister. She looked uncomfortable. Miss Montgomery was very specific about the seating arrangements. She personally reviewed each name multiple times. The situation came to a head when our parents organized a family dinner 1 month before the wedding. It was the first time in years both Mom and Dad would be in the same room, a testament to the significance of Ben's marriage. The dinner, at an upscale restaurant, included Ben, Sienna, both sets of parents, and me. From the moment we sat down, the tension was palpable. Sienna kept whispering to Victoria, shooting glances my way. When the conversation turned to wedding details, they spoke vaguely, changing the subject whenever I asked specific questions. During the main course, Victoria made a comment that sent a chill down my spine. It's so important to have the right atmosphere at a wedding, she said, swirling her wine glass. The proper guests, the right connections. A wedding isn't just a celebration, it's a statement about your place in society. Sienna nodded. Some people simply don't understand the social implications of a high-profile event, she added, looking directly at me. Running hotels is one thing, but appreciating true elegance is quite another. My father, David, never particularly perceptive, laughed uncomfortably. Anya understands elegance just fine. Her hotels are top-rated. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Yes, but there's a difference between serving the elite and being one of them. Isn't there? The implication was clear. In their eyes, I was the help, not a social equal. I looked at Ben, expecting him to defend me, but he was staring intently at his plate, avoiding eye contact. My mother, Carol, perhaps sensing my distress, tried to change the subject. Anya has been so generous with her contribution. The venue looks absolutely stunning. Sienna's response was swift and cutting. Yes, the financial arrangement has been helpful, though we've had to make substantial upgrades to bring the space up to standard. I felt slapped. My flagship hotel, the jewel of my business empire, was being called substandard by a woman who had never worked a day in her life. The Sapphire Grand is a 5-star establishment, I said evenly. We host diplomats, celebrities, and yes, society weddings on a regular basis. Of course you do, dear. Victoria patted my hand condescendingly. And we appreciate your establishment's effort to accommodate our vision. After dinner, I tried to speak with Ben privately, but Sienna intercepted us. Ben, darling, we need to discuss the rehearsal dinner with Daddy, she said, pulling him away. The look she gave me was triumphant, almost smug. Later that week, I received a disturbing message from a friend who worked at the country club where Sienna was a member. She had overheard Sienna laughing with her bridesmaids about the hotel girl who thought she was invited to the wedding. She actually thinks she'll be sitting at the family table, Sienna had reportedly said. As if we would want someone like her front and center in the photos, but we need to keep her happy until the big day, since she controls the venue. Another bridesmaid asked, what about the money she contributed? $65,000 is a lot to take, without including her. Sienna's response chilled me. That money is already spent. What is she going to do? Ask for it back? Besides, Ben says she's loaded. She'll get over it. I confronted Ben that evening, calling him and demanding answers. Am I invited to your wedding or not? I asked bluntly. Because from what I'm hearing, Sienna has other ideas. Ben sighed heavily. Nat, it's complicated. Sienna and her mother have very specific ideas about the guest list. They're concerned about maintaining a certain atmosphere. An atmosphere that doesn't include your only sister? The sister who gave you $65,000 toward this wedding. My voice cracked with emotion. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Ben said defensively. Sienna's family moves in important circles. This wedding could open doors for both of us. Since when do you care about important circles? I demanded. What happened to the brother who used to say we only needed each other? People grow up, Anya. They change. Maybe you should try it sometime instead of holding on to the past. His words were like daggers. Is that Sienna talking or you? I asked quietly. This conversation isn't productive, he said, his voice cold. I need to go. Sienna and I have an appointment with the florist. As I hung up, I felt a deep sense of loss. The brother I had known and loved my entire life was slipping away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Still, I clung to hope that this was temporary madness, that the real Ben would return once the wedding stress passed. I decided to make one last attempt to salvage our relationship. I sent him a heartfelt email, reminding him of all we'd been through and expressing my hurt at being excluded. I assured him I'd ensure the venue and catering were perfect, regardless of my personal feelings, because that's what family did. His response was brief and formal. "Thank you for your understanding. I will speak with Sienna about the guest list situation." Days passed with no further communication. The wedding was now just 1 week away, and I had begun to accept that I might not be attending my own brother's ceremony, despite providing the venue and a substantial financial contribution. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. My phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I was in a budget meeting, but answered in case it was wedding-related. "Hello, is this Anya Reed?" a professional voice inquired. "Yes, speaking," I replied, stepping out of the conference room. "This is Chloe, the wedding planner for the Montgomery Reed ceremony scheduled at the Sapphire Grand next Saturday." Her tone was crisp, businesslike. "I'm calling regarding your deposit payment of $65,000. My heart skipped a beat. "Yes, is there an issue? I had processed it myself months ago." "Not exactly," Chloe hesitated. "I've been instructed by the family to inform you that your invitation to the wedding has been canceled. However, they would like to retain the deposit you provided." The world seemed to stop. I gripped the hallway wall. "Excuse me?" Chloe cleared her throat uncomfortably. "The family has decided to revise the guest list. Your attendance is no longer required. However, they wish to keep the venue and catering arrangements as planned, utilizing the deposit you already paid." "Which family?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who exactly made this decision?" "Miss Montgomery and her mother provided the instruction," Chloe replied. "I was told that Mr. Reed is aware and has agreed to the arrangement. Ben had agreed to uninvite me from his wedding, but keep my $65,000. My own brother, the same brother who once gave me half his sandwich every day because he knew I was too shy to ask for more. The brother who held my hand at our grandmother's funeral and promised we'd always have each other. May I ask why?" I managed, fighting to keep my voice steady. Chloe paused, clearly uncomfortable. "I was informed that your presence might distract from the event's intended atmosphere. Miss Montgomery felt that the family dynamics might create tension on her special day." "Family dynamics?" I repeated incredulously. "I'm his sister, his only sibling. Miss Montgomery also mentioned something about your professional connection to the venue." Chloe sounded like she was reading from a script. "Potentially confusing guests about your role. She specifically mentioned concerns about you being perceived as staff rather than family given your ownership of the establishment." The cruelty of the statement knocked the wind out of me. After years of hard work building my business from nothing, my success was being used against me. I was too associated with the service industry to be worthy of attending my brother's wedding. "Did Ben say this?" I asked, needing to know if these were his words or Sienna's. "I haven't spoken directly with Mr. Reed about this matter," Chloe admitted. "The instruction came from Ms. Montgomery, but she assured me that Mr. Reed was in agreement." I closed my eyes, trying to process the betrayal and the $65,000 I contributed. They expect to keep that money while excluding me from the event. "Yes," Chloe confirmed, sounding increasingly uncomfortable. "The deposit is considered non-refundable at this point as stated in the contract. Miss Montgomery mentioned that you had presented it as a gift, not contingent on your attendance." A wave of anger washed over me, clearing away the shock and hurt. This was beyond inconsiderate. It was calculating and cruel. They had used me for my venue, my catering services, and my money, all while planning to exclude me from the actual celebration. "Miss Reed, are you still there?" Chloe asked after a long silence. "Yes," I said, my voice suddenly calm and clear. "I want to confirm that I understand correctly. The bride and her mother have decided I am not welcome at my brother's wedding despite my significant financial contribution and the fact that the event is being held at my property, and my brother has apparently agreed to this arrangement. That is my understanding, yes, Chloe replied cautiously. I took a deep breath. Chloe, I appreciate you calling me directly. I'm guessing you didn't know that I am the owner of the Sapphire Grand and Elite Catering. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. No, I was not aware of that connection. Miss Montgomery introduced you only as Mr. Reed's sister, who had contributed to the wedding fund. I see, I said, a plan forming in my mind. In that case, I have a message I would like you to deliver to Miss Montgomery and my brother. Of course, Chloe replied, her professional demeanor slipping as she realized the precarious position she was in. Please tell them that I said to cancel the entire wedding. Chloe gasped. But Miss Reed, you cannot. You are not the bride or groom. You do not have the authority to cancel the event. No, I agreed. But I own the venue, the catering company, and the hotel chain they booked for out-of-town guests. And according to Section 12 of the contract they signed, I reserve the right to cancel any event that violates our company's core values, which include respect and integrity. The silence on the other end was deafening. But the deposits, the guests, everything is arranged. Chloe stammered. Yes, it is unfortunate timing, I said coolly. Please inform Miss Montgomery and my brother that unless I receive a formal apology and invitation to the wedding by 5 p.m. today, the Sapphire Grand will no longer be available for their event. All deposits will be forfeited as per the cancellation policy they agreed to. This is highly irregular, Chloe protested. I have never encountered such a situation in my career. Neither have I admitted. But then, I have never been uninvited for my brother's wedding while being expected to fund it either. Please deliver my message promptly. I ended the call and leaned against the wall, my heart pounding. Part of me couldn't believe what I had just done. Another part knew it was long overdue. For too long, I had allowed Sienna and her family to treat me with disrespect while I smiled and accommodated their demands. For too long, I had watched my brother transform into someone I barely recognized. The time for passivity was over. If Ben wanted to choose Sienna's elitist values over our lifelong bond, that was his right. But he would not do it in my venue, with my money, while excluding me from the celebration. Within minutes, my phone began to ring. It was Ben. I let it go to voicemail. Then Sienna called. Then Victoria. I ignored them all, returning to my budget meeting with a serene smile that confused my executive team. Is everything all right? Michael asked, noticing my changed demeanor. Actually, yes, I replied. I think everything is finally becoming very clear. By 4:30 that afternoon, my office phone, cell phone, and email were flooded. Chloe had apparently delivered my ultimatum, unleashing a storm of panic. The wedding was only 10 days away. Over 200 guests had confirmed. Deposits had been paid to florists, photographers, entertainers. At precisely 4:55, there was a commotion in the hotel lobby. Ben had arrived with Sienna and both sets of parents in tow. It was time to face the consequences of my stand. I instructed my assistant to escort the wedding party to my private conference room rather than my office. This was no longer a family matter, but a business dispute, and I wanted the setting to reflect that distinction. When I entered the room 5 minutes later, the tension was palpable. Sienna was red-faced and teary, clutching her mother's hand. Victoria looked apoplectic, her lips pressed into a thin line. My parents appeared confused and distressed. And Ben, my beloved brother, looked like a stranger, his face a mask of anger and embarrassment. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, as soon as I closed the door. I remained standing, hands clasped in front of me. Enforcing the terms of our contract, I replied calmly, and standing up for myself, finally. Sienna's father, Richard Montgomery, stepped forward. He was a large man accustomed to intimidating others. "This is outrageous. We have a binding agreement. You cannot simply cancel a wedding with 10 days' notice." I met his gaze steadily. "Actually, I can. Section 12 of the venue contract clearly states that the Sapphire Grand reserves the right to cancel any event that violates our ethical standards or poses a reputational risk to our establishment. Ethical standards? Victoria scoffed. What nonsense is this? Attempting to exclude the venue owner from an event while retaining her financial contribution constitutes fraud, I stated. That violates both ethical standards and potentially the law. We didn't exclude you, Sienna protested, tears streaming down her face. We simply revised the guest list. By removing only me, I pointed out. After accepting my $65,000 contribution. My mother stepped forward, clearly confused. Anya, what is going on? Why would you not be invited to your own brother's wedding? I looked at Ben, giving him the opportunity to explain. He avoided my gaze, staring at the carpet. Perhaps Ben or Sienna would like to explain their reasoning, I suggested after the silence stretched uncomfortably. This is a misunderstanding, Ben finally said, his voice lacking conviction. Chloe must have confused the instructions. Chloe, who had been quietly observing, straightened her spine. I followed Miss Montgomery's instructions exactly as they were given to me. I was told to inform Miss Reed that her invitation had been rescinded, but that the deposit would be retained. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. This is ridiculous. So there was a miscommunication about the guest list. It happens with large events. That is no reason to threaten the entire wedding. This was not a miscommunication, I said firmly. This was a deliberate decision to exclude me while keeping my money. You offered that money as a gift, Sienna snapped, dropping all pretense of civility. Gifts don't come with conditions. Actually, they often do, I countered, especially when the gift is a business transaction with a signed contract. Richard pulled out his cell phone. This is absurd. I'm calling our attorney right now. We will sue you for breach of contract. You are welcome to do that, I replied. But the contract is quite clear about my right to cancel under these circumstances. Additionally, I have documentary evidence of the bride's intent to defraud me by accepting my financial contribution while planning to exclude me from the event. That is a serious accusation, Richard growled. Yes, it is, I agreed. Almost as serious as telling your daughter it's acceptable to take $65,000 from someone and then ban them from the event they funded. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. Ben, is this true? Did you agree to exclude your sister from your wedding? Ben looked trapped, his eyes darting between Sienna and me. It's complicated, he muttered. It is actually quite simple, I said, feeling a strange calm despite the chaos. Either I am welcome at my brother's wedding as a full and respected family member, or there will be no wedding at the Sapphire Grand. Sienna burst into fresh tears. You can't do this. Everything is arranged. Our guests are arriving from Europe next week. The custom gown, the flowers, the band that required a 6-month deposit. I understand. It's inconvenient, I acknowledged. But so is discovering that your only sibling has decided you're not good enough to attend his wedding despite your generous contribution. Victoria turned to Ben. This is ridiculous. Call her bluff. We can find another venue. I smiled thinly. With 10 days' notice in the height of wedding season, that seems unlikely, but you are welcome to try. Of course, you would forfeit the deposit here, and most other venues will require full payment up front for such a last-minute booking. The color drained from Sienna's face as she realized the impossibility. Daddy, do something. Richard looked thoughtful. Perhaps we can come to some arrangement. What exactly do you want, Miss Reed? Respect, I said simply. A sincere apology and acknowledgement that what you plan to do is wrong, and a guarantee that I will be treated as the family that I am at this event. This is extortion, Victoria hissed. No, I corrected her. This is a boundary. I have spent months accommodating every demand, absorbing every slight, and financing a significant portion of this wedding. In return, I have been treated with contempt and ultimately excluded entirely. That ends today. My mother moved to stand beside me, surprising everyone, including myself. I agree with Anya. What you were planning is shameful, Ben. I raised you better than this. Ben finally looked up, his expression a mix of shame and defiance. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. I understand perfectly, I replied. You have been so desperate to impress Sienna and her family that you were willing to betray the sister who has always been there for you. The sister who helped put you through trade school, who celebrated every success and supported you through every failure. Something in my words seemed to penetrate the fog he had been living in. For the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of the real Ben in his eyes. I never wanted to hurt you, Nat, he said quietly. Yet you were willing to ban me from your wedding while keeping my money, I pointed out. How did you think that would make me feel? I thought, he hesitated. I thought you would understand that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the bigger picture. And I was the sacrifice? I asked, my voice breaking slightly despite my resolve. Ben had no answer for that. Richard cleared his throat. Let's be practical about this, Miss Reed. If we agree to include you in the wedding as requested, will you allow the event to proceed as planned? That depends, I said, turning to face Ben directly. Is that what you want, Ben? Am I just an obligation to be tolerated, or do you actually want your only sister at your wedding? The room fell silent as everyone waited for Ben's response. This was the moment of truth, not just for the wedding, but for our relationship. Ben looked at Sienna, then at me, then down at his hands. I want you there, Nat, he said finally. I always did. I just got caught up in everything. The planning, the expectations, the pressure to make everything perfect. Perfect for whom? I asked softly. He had no answer for that either. Sienna stomped her foot in frustration. This is my wedding. I should decide who attends. It's our wedding, Ben corrected her, seeming to find his voice at last. And Anya is my sister.
She should be there.
She deserves to be there. The look Sienna gave him was venomous. After the stunt, you still want her there? She just threatened to ruin our entire wedding. After you tried to exclude her while keeping her money, Ben countered, standing a little straighter. Think about that, Sienna. How would you feel if someone did that to you? For perhaps the first time since I'd met her, Sienna seemed genuinely speechless. Here's what's going to happen, I said, addressing the entire room. I will allow the wedding to proceed as planned with the following conditions. First, I will receive a formal written apology from the bride and groom for the attempt to exclude me. Second, I will be treated with the respect due to a family member and business owner throughout all wedding events. Third, my $65,000 contribution will be acknowledged in the wedding program as a gift from a loving sister, not simply as a venue discount. Richard nodded thoughtfully. Those terms seem reasonable given the circumstances. Father,
Sienna protested.
Enough, Sienna, he said firmly. Miss Reed has us over a barrel, and you know it.
More importantly, she is right.
What you and your mother planned was inappropriate and potentially illegal. We are fortunate she is willing to work with us at all. Victoria looked as if she had swallowed something sour, but remained silent. My parents exchanged glances, clearly processing the family drama they had walked into. Do we have an agreement? I asked, looking directly at Ben. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded.
Yes.
And Nat, I am sorry. I should have never let things get this far. It was a start, but I knew we had a long way to go to rebuild the trust. Then the wedding will proceed as scheduled, I said, opening the conference room door to signal that our meeting was concluded. Chloe will coordinate with my staff on the final details. As the group filed out, Ben lingered behind. When we were alone, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. I can't believe I just did that, he said, half laughing, half crying. Did you see their faces? I did, I confirmed, handing him a glass of water. That was quite an exit. I'm going to pay for it financially and socially, he acknowledged. But the moment the minister asked that question, I knew I couldn't go through with it. All I could think about was how Sienna and her mother treated you, how they were willing to exclude you while taking your money. And I realized that if I married her, I would be endorsing that behavior. I would be becoming one of them. What will you do now? I asked. He shrugged, looking suddenly lighter despite the circumstances. Go back to my apartment, return to work, start over. It will be embarrassing for a while, but at least I will be living authentically. I squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you, Ben. That took real courage. I learned it from my little sister, he said with a warm smile. The hotel girl who built an empire while staying true to herself. In the following days, Ben faced the fallout. The Montgomerys demanded repayment for their portion of the wedding expenses, which he agreed to handle over time. Some of Sienna's society friends spread unkind rumors, but Ben's true friends stood by him. As for me, I had my brother back, and that was worth more than any business deal or social connection. The Sapphire Grand suffered no lasting damage to its reputation. In fact, Chloe later told me that my handling of the situation had earned me respect in professional circles. Everyone knows the Montgomerys can be difficult clients, she confided. The fact that you stood your ground while maintaining professionalism has only enhanced your standing. 1 month after the non-wedding, Ben and I resumed our tradition of Sunday brunches, something we hadn't done since Sienna entered the picture. As we shared pancakes and coffee, he looked more like himself than he had in years. I got a call from Victoria Montgomery yesterday, he mentioned casually. She wanted to let me know that Sienna is dating a hedge fund manager now. Apparently, they met at a charity gala 2 weeks after our wedding was supposed to happen. That was fast, I remarked. Ben laughed. I'm not surprised. I think I was always more of an accessory than a partner to her, the successful contractor with the rugged good looks who could be molded into an acceptable society husband. And now I am dating someone new, too, he admitted with a sheepish smile. Remember Emily from the city planning office? We always got along when I was submitting permits. She called to check on me after hearing about the wedding, and we ended up talking for hours. Emily is wonderful, I said sincerely. Smart, kind, and she values you for who you actually are. That makes all the difference. Ben agreed. She wants to meet you properly. By the way, I told her all about my amazing sister who saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. I would love that, I said, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer sunshine streaming through the window. The wounds caused by Sienna and her family would take time to fully heal. But Ben and I were rebuilding our bond, stronger and wiser than before. Sometimes it takes nearly losing someone to realize how valuable they truly are. 6 months after the wedding that never was, I sat in my office at the Sapphire Grand, reviewing quarterly financial reports. The hotel chain was thriving, bookings at an all-time high, a waiting list for elite catering. A knock at the door interrupted my concentration. It was Michael, my hotel manager, with a strange expression. Sienna Montgomery is in the lobby, he announced. She's asking to speak with you. I set down my pen, surprised.
Sienna?
Did she say what this is about? No, but she seems different, less imperial, if you know what I mean. Curiosity got the better of me. Send her up. When Sienna entered my office, I barely recognized her. Gone was the perfectly coiffed society princess with designer clothes and flawless makeup. This Sienna wore simple jeans, a sweater, and minimal cosmetics. Her hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. Thank you for seeing me, she said, her voice lacking the entitled edge I remembered. I know this must be unexpected. Please have a seat, I offered. What can I do for you? Sienna sat, folding her hands nervously. I came to apologize properly this time, not with some lawyer-drafted statement. I raised an eyebrow, silent, waiting. What I did to you was inexcusable, she admitted. Trying to exclude you from Ben's wedding while keeping your money was not just rude, it was cruel and potentially criminal. I was so caught up in creating the perfect society wedding that I lost sight of basic human decency. What brought on this revelation? I asked, genuinely curious.
She sighed.
After Ben left me at the altar, I was angry and humiliated. I blamed everyone but myself. I quickly started dating Curtis, a hedge fund manager my mother introduced me to, thinking I could just replace Ben and move on. I heard about that, I acknowledged. Curtis proposed after just 6 weeks, Sienna continued. My mother was thrilled. His family has even more money than we do. But then I overheard him talking to his friends about me. Her voice cracked slightly. He said I was high maintenance but good arm candy for client meetings. He said he could train me to be the perfect corporate wife. That sounds painful, I said, feeling an unexpected twinge of sympathy. It was a wake-up call, she admitted. For the first time, I saw myself through someone else's eyes, and I didn't like what I saw. I broke off the engagement and started therapy. My mother was furious, but my father supported my decision. Richard seemed to have more self-awareness than Victoria, I observed. Sienna nodded. Dad pulled me aside after the therapy announcement and told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Sienna, I indulged your mother's social climbing because I thought it made her happy, but it turned her into someone I barely recognize, and now it's doing the same to you." Powerful words, I murmured. It has been a difficult few months of self-examination, she continued. I've had to confront some ugly truths about myself and how I treated people, especially you and Ben. The therapist helped me see that my behavior stemmed from deep insecurity. Despite all the privilege I grew up with, I never felt good enough on my own merits. I studied her closely, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. To my surprise, I found none. I don't expect forgiveness, Sienna said, meeting my gaze directly. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the harm I caused, and I am working to become a better person. I appreciate that, I said carefully. Genuine apologies are rare. There's one more thing, she added, reaching into her purse. This is for you. She handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $65,000. Your deposit, she explained. It should have been returned to you immediately after the wedding was canceled. It was wrong of me to try to keep it. I stared at the check in surprise. Thank you. This is unexpected. It is the right thing to do, she said simply, standing to leave. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for seeing me. As she turned to go, I found myself asking, have you spoken to Ben? She paused at the door.
No.
I thought about reaching out, but I decided that would be selfish. He seems happy with Emily, from what I've heard. He deserves that happiness without me complicating things. With that, she was gone, leaving me to ponder the strange encounter. People could change, it seemed, if they were willing to face their mistakes honestly. That evening, I met Ben and Emily for dinner at my newest hotel property. They were glowing with happiness, clearly well-matched in values and temperament. Emily was warm, intelligent, and treated the waitstaff with genuine kindness, something I noticed immediately. You'll never guess who came to see me today, I told Ben over dessert. When I recounted Sienna's visit and apology, his eyes widened in disbelief. Sienna Montgomery admitted she was wrong and returned the money voluntarily? Are you sure it was really her and not an imposter? I laughed. It was her, though a very different version from the woman you almost married. Ben shook his head in wonder. People can surprise you, I guess, though I'm grateful every day that I didn't go through with the wedding. Emily squeezed his hand affectionately. So am I, selfishly. The whole experience taught me something important, I reflected. For years, I defined success by my business achievements. I worked endless hours building the Sapphire brand, sometimes at the expense of personal relationships. I took pride in being self-sufficient, never needing to ask for help. You've always been the strong one, Ben agreed. But strength isn't about handling everything alone, I continued. Real strength is knowing when to stand up for yourself, when to set boundaries, and when to walk away from situations that diminish your worth. If I hadn't found the courage to confront you and Sienna about the wedding exclusion, I might still be letting people take advantage of my generosity while treating me as less than. I'm sorry I put you in that position, Ben said quietly. We both learned from it, I assured him, and our relationship is stronger for having weathered that storm. In the months that followed, I made changes in both my personal and professional life. I began volunteering with a mentorship program for young women entrepreneurs, sharing not just business advice, but lessons about self-worth and healthy boundaries. My experiences with Sienna and her family had shown me how many people, especially women, struggle with standing up for themselves. I also reconnected with old friends, finding joy in relationships that had nothing to do with business advantage. Ben and I instituted a strict no-work talk policy for our Sunday brunches, focusing instead on our lives, dreams, and the simple pleasure of sibling companionship. Perhaps most surprisingly, I developed a cordial relationship with Richard Montgomery. After Sienna's apology, he reached out to discuss a potential business collaboration. Over lunch, he confided that my handling of the wedding situation had earned his respect. "I built my car dealership empire by recognizing talent and integrity," he told me. "You demonstrated both. Victoria and Sienna may have wealth and social connections, but you have something more valuable: character." The $65,000 check from Sienna went into a special fund I created to help couples who wanted meaningful weddings without financial strain. The True Love, True Values grant provided venue and catering services at the Sapphire Grand for couples who demonstrated authentic commitment to each other and their communities. As for my brother, he and Emily became engaged a year after the non-wedding disaster. They planned a simple ceremony in the garden of my newest hotel property, with only close friends and family in attendance. When Ben asked me to be his best woman, I accepted with tears of joy. On the morning of his wedding, as I helped him straighten his tie, Ben looked at me with gratitude in his eyes. "You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life," he said. "Not just by stopping the wedding with Sienna, but by reminding me of who I really am and what actually matters." "That's what family does," I replied, echoing the words I had spoken during our confrontation a year earlier. "The real kind, not the kind that only values status and appearances." The lesson I learned through that painful experience was profound. True self-worth comes not from what you accomplish or who accepts you, but from honoring your own values and refusing to compromise them for approval or advantage. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to say no when someone tries to diminish your worth. The path to healing began with that difficult stand, continued through rebuilding authentic connections, and led to a life richer in meaning than I could have imagined. By refusing to accept disrespect, I had not only preserved my dignity, but helped others, including Sienna, confront important truths about themselves. Life offers many tests of character. The wedding that never happened became one of mine, revealing strengths I didn't know I possessed and values I would never again compromise. In standing up for myself, I discovered that self-respect is the foundation upon which all meaningful relationships must be built. You cannot control how others treat you, but you always have the power to decide what treatment you will accept. Sometimes, saying no is the first step towards saying yes to the life you truly deserve.